Welcome to See You on the Other Side, where the world of the mysterious collides with the world of entertainment. A discussion of art, music, movies, spirituality, the weird, and self-discovery. And now, your hosts, musicians and entertainers who have their own weakness for the weird, Mike and Wendy from the band Sunspot.
Well, that's it, Wendy. It's October 1st, and Halloween season is upon us.
Let the fun commence, our favorite time of year.
It is. It is our favorite time of year. I mean, I guess it's a little bit Halloween for us all the time, but now it gets to be Halloween for everybody else, too. So it's like they've caught up with us.
Yeah. Now we can go to places like Fleet Farm, where I went yesterday, and they had the biggest Halloween section ever. Tons and tons of different candy and decorations and pumpkins, and so much fun. I could get lost in there. So
you could get lost inside the Fleet Farm. But I love it when you go into these places now, like Menards or Fleet Farm or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they just have all the decorations up. So, like, you know, as you walk through, you hear, like, the cackling at you, like the crypt keeper or whatever is cackling at you.
Well, also, people in my neighborhood have started decorating, which is always fun. So there's a house that has Jason, like a full body Jason, just leaning up
Friday
against
the 13th.
side of the house. So it's on my regular jogging route, and when I come around the corner and see it, like the first few times, it caught me by surprise and freaked me out pretty bad. But now I know to look for it, and so I kind of...
Oh, good.
Right, here comes Jason.
Yeah, I saw the first Halloween decorations of the season when I was walking back from the park the other day, and I didn't even notice it, but Adeline, my daughter, noticed it. She just points out and goes, "Boo, boo." And I'm like, what's that? And then I look, and then I see, and there's a ghost decoration, the boo, to which she was referring, over a full little graveyard that they made in their front yard. So that was fun.
Nice. Well, you'll be hearing boo a lot in the next few weeks here, Mike.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. And we have the Halloween decorations up at home now on the inside. But the one of my favorite graveyards that somebody ever made in their homemade decorations was that there was one on my old running route in the west side of Madison. And they had a graveyard in there of all the people that had died on Game of Thrones.
Oh, that's funny.
So that was the name of all the people, all the main characters, whatever.
Was it called Spoiler Cemetery?
Well, that's what I was thinking. If you did not, if you weren't current with the show, like let's say you were a season behind or whatever, you're like, oh no.
Yeah, I might be able to relate to that.
But it just was great. I was like, when I was running by it, I'm like, oh yes, somebody had some imagination to this one. And anybody that's a George R. R. Martin fan like myself, that was pretty exciting.
Very cool.
Anyway, love Halloween. This is the season, so we hope you guys are enjoying yourselves. Feel free to send us pictures of your Halloween decorations or your favorite Halloween houses, and we'll be glad to retweet those, whatever. At Other Side Talk is our Twitter and our Insta. You can tag us in your Instagram too if you take a cool Instagram post, and we'll repost that to our account. And at Other Side Podcast is that where we'll be checking out the coolest Halloween decorations. Please send them to us because we love them.
Definitely.
So here's a story I've been following for today's episode. Here's a story I've been following for probably the past couple years. And if you guys are subscribers to our paranormal newsletter, and if you're not subscribers to our paranormal newsletter, what the hell are you doing with your life?
Oh, man. Hey, it's not too late.
No, it's
not. You can
always
sign up.
And it's free, so you guys can join that at OtherSidePodcast.com. Has the place where you can sign right up for the paranormal newsletter. But the past few paranormal newsletters, we keep having these new news articles about a medical startup that is offering rejuvenation treatments for old people. Now, Wendy's not old, but I am old.
Thanks, Mike.
I am 41 years old. And
I don't think I'd call you old.
But the thing is, I still have a lot of energy. So like Friday night, I played a show, drove 3 hours back at 5 o'clock the next morning, went straight to the park and my daughter's first haircut and all that kind of things. And I still feel like I have a lot of energy and I still don't feel old. But then sometimes you just have this like, oh, it's 6 p.m. and I'm already falling asleep kind of thing.
Well, it doesn't help that the sun is starting to go down at like 6:30.
That's
now.
true. And the weather today here in Madison is like it's like the end of the world when
You really want to just crawl under your blankies and go back to sleep.
the sun will never rise again is how it feels here. But you just have those times like, oh, I'm just getting so tired, or like weird little things. I don't have a lot of aches and pains yet, and I don't have that, like my back's like, oh, my back, like that stuff's still fine. But I do get those little like I get tired in times that normally 20 years ago I think I wouldn't get tired. And
You need your afternoon naps, Mike.
right, that's what we're coming to. And so like I've even used that thing of like I'm just resting my eyes. That's something my father said.
I love that.
Are you falling asleep? I'm just resting my eyes. And okay. So what I'm trying to say is I'm even feeling it. Okay. The first thing of, what would that rejuvenation be? And I think of myself as a very active person and someone who has a lot of energy. And I'm like, well, would I spend $8,000 to get a blood transfusion of young blood? That's what we're going to be talking about today.
Oh my goodness. That's serious.
Yeah, this parabiosis, which means like next to each other. So parabiosis is, it's pretty much taking the blood from one creature and putting it to the other. It's taking part of the body of one creature and putting it into the other. It means living beside, but some of the research is almost like the human centipede. Yeah, and you're looking at these. So I'm reading through these journal articles that people submit. And so with mice, they're not just doing a blood transfusion. Like they don't just go in with a little needle and say, we're going to take some blood out. Here, a little mouse, we're going to take some blood out and then put it in this older mouse. No, they stitch the mice together like the human centipede. So then they share a circulatory system.
Wow. That's very Frankensteinish.
Very Frankensteinish. And, this idea that young blood can rejuvenate older people, I'd never really heard of it before outside of the vampire legends, right? Like that's where you hear this kind of thing. But it wasn't until we had Robert Damon Schneck, the historian of the strange and the writer of The Bye-Bye Man, the book, not the movie. But the movie was based on his book, but he didn't write the screenplay. So if you thought the movie was pants, which a lot of people did, don't blame Robert. He's a great storyteller. But Robert said that one of the most interesting things he had discovered when he was doing research into strange stories was that people all the way up to the 19th century drank blood because they thought it was healthy. And, he talks about how in the Roman gladiatorial arenas, the Romans thought that strong, powerful blood of a person can fix epilepsy, can help epileptic seizures and stuff. So there's stories of epileptics running to the gladiatorial arena after a gladiator has been felled and drinking the blood from him on the floor of the Colosseum as he's dying.
Oh, wow.
And he also talks about that Hans Christian Andersen, in a biography of Hans Christian Andersen, they even talk about that Hans Christian Andersen attended a execution because they still had public executions in Europe in the 19th century. And they had public executions in the United States in the 20th century. So let's not act like, those European savages, because we're going to get to the European savages pretty quick here.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely some medieval European savagery in today's episode. But Hans Christian Andersen talked about that they collected the blood from the person being executed to give to an epileptic patient. So those myths persisted for a long time. And that, drinking healthy blood, the life force of something, could make a sick person feel better, and could make an old person feel more youthful.
I wonder if you could mix it up with something to kind of make it not taste totally disgusting.
Well, there's a reporter that did it, and he did it with cow's blood. It's not human blood, but he drank fresh cow's blood when it, like right from the cow, and he said it wasn't gross at all. It was like drinking warm milk.
Ew.
It was like drinking warm milk right from the cow. So it's not.
It's hard to imagine.
It's not necessarily disgusting. I mean,
okay.
I doubt it's going to be delicious.
But I've tasted blood before. Like when you cut your lip or something.
Sure. Oh yeah.
And I wouldn't say it was delicious.
No, I mean, but it's also
Can't imagine choking down like a glass of it.
like straight from the jugular of someone, or
No.
straight from the wound of a gladiator. I cannot. No, I myself cannot imagine doing that. But if it makes you feel better, and the person's going to be dead anyway, like how
man.
we used to talk about Indians, how they used to use the whole animal.
Right.
Yeah. Well, now you're using the whole person being executed. They're getting used. Anyway, we're not.
Okay. All right.
That probably would be unconstitutional, cruel, and unusual, like letting people drink his blood after they already kill him. So I'm thinking the ACLU might have a case there.
Maybe.
But what if it's voluntary? And that's what we're kind of get to here. I mean, we kind of first want to talk about the legend that people always associate when they think of a fountain of youth from blood, besides just the traditional vampire story. And the thing is, the vampires of legend, like we talked about in our discussion with Jeff Belanger when he tells us the story about Mercy Brown, and in the late 19th century, where they actually did think that this little girl was a vampire in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
It's not the like romantic Anne Rice, Lestat vampires that you get, where everybody's beautiful, or the Twilight vampires that are sparkly. I mean, it's not even. I mean, it's not even the Salem's Lot or Nosferatu disgusting looking vampires. It's just like people coming back from the dead by just getting up out of their graves and wandering around and sucking blood, animal blood, human blood. Terrorizing a small village kind of thing. So, like when we think about vampires, you think, oh, Dracula, man, well, he's a good looking guy. He's hitting on that Mina Harker. Like he's a stud. If you saw the redo of Dracula from a couple of years ago with Jonathan Rhys-Meyers playing Dracula, you're like, oh man, Dracula doesn't seem like a bad guy. It seems like a pretty good life. Just keep a little blood in the bank in the fridge or whatever, and you're fine. It seems like a great life. But the real legends behind these vampires were just people that did either they did horrible things in life or they didn't make their peace with God, so they were condemned. And it wouldn't be a fun thing. To just dig yourself out of the ground, walk around in the cold, and then just bite people.
And it's ugly and messy.
Right,
Extracting blood from living human beings. I mean, it's not romantic and
no, at all. It's not beautiful at all. It's not this Euro trash that this guy's walking around like, I want to suck your ass. It's none of that. The real stories are gross. And so the idea of a vampire and someone who had a thirst for blood that starts to get a little more glamorous comes from the Blood Countess, and that's Elizabeth Bathory. And first of all, Elizabeth Bathory is such a great name.
It is. It sounds like it's a made-up character almost.
Yes, completely sounds like it. It's like because the legend is that she bathed in the blood of virgins to keep her skin looking young and fresh. So when I think about Elizabeth Bathory, I think about the first time I ever heard the name was once again in this book I bought at a school book fair, the giant book of fantastic facts. It was this big yellow book that has like 300 pages and illustrations of just dumb facts, not checked whatsoever, obviously. And it was in English, so like when they talk, it was a book from England. So when they talked about money, everything was in pounds, and they talked about distances, it was in kilometers and the things.
That's fun.
But they had, like the worst serial killer in the world was Countess Elizabeth Bathory, who is said to have killed over 650 young servant girls, and she would bathe in the blood of virgins in order to keep her skin young and fresh and supple.
Yeah, she doesn't sound like an actual human being at all.
No.
Not just the name, the deeds.
Right. So you're telling me it's Elizabeth Bathory is the one who took blood baths? All right. I guess that works. But no, the thing is that you read that and you're like, oh, God. And then just went to the Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum in the Wisconsin Dells. The haunted Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum in the Wisconsin Dells. And they have like
Believe it or not.
They have this dark side, the dark side of Ripley's. And they have like a little bathtub that you can kind of peek in on. They have a bathtub you can peek in on, and it's Countess Elizabeth Bathory bathing in the blood of the virgins. Right?
Oh, yuck.
And so they've got an actual, like, I'd say diorama, but it's a life-size woman bathing in blood. But that's the thing. Like, we have this story about the Blood Countess, and you're like, well, what really happened? Like, what was she really about? Was she a vampire? You know, did she drink people's blood because she thought it would have this rejuvenating effect, like the people at Ambrosia Medical say it does? Or was that just kind of a legend that came up around her? And when you go back into the story of Elizabeth Bathory, I mean, it doesn't seem like she was a saint, let's say. I mean, she's not like, it's not like, oh yeah, no, it's all lies. But it doesn't seem that she quite was as bloodthirsty as people say she was.
Okay.
So we're going back to 1560. All right, so this is the 16th century in which she's born to George and Anna Bathory, and it's a very important name in the Hungarian Empire. Okay, so the Bathory name is wealthy, it's the aristocracy, it's powerful. She's cousins with the King of Poland. All right, the King of Poland, she's cousins with him. And, you know, speaking of bloodlines and the King of Poland, my mother's aunt would always say that we can trace our lineage back to Polish royalty.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we always say we're the Polish blue bloods. The Bone family, BOHN, could take. You know, we could trace our lineage back. So one day I will return to Poland, and I will claim the throne for my family once again. So that Huberty can be as an important of a name. Or I guess if you're going to be King of Poland, it can't be Huberty. It's got to be Hubertsky or something like that, or Hubertowski. Bring Hubertowski over here, King Hubertowski. Anyway, but the Bathory family is obviously very powerful. In fact, it's so powerful. You know, she's engaged at 11 years old because it's a marriage of obviously. Meant to strengthen the bonds of a relationship between aristocratic families. It's not like young Elizabeth was out there and fell in love with somebody at 11 and decides to get engaged. They did marry early back then, but not quite that early. So, but the reason I said that, so she gets engaged to someone who's 5 years older than she is. Ferenc Nadasti. I always murder these European names, but it's not, I'm doing what I can, guys. But
it's okay.
Ferenc Nadasti, but he takes her last name. So the Bathory name is such a big name that you'd think that, always the woman would be subject to the man. But in this case, he takes her last name because that's a more powerful last name.
It's desirable.
Yeah. Her husband, though, now he's no stranger to cruelty and sadism and the whole thing because he's been fighting in the war against the Ottoman Empire.
So he's seen his share of blood as well.
Right. And they're also not very far away from Vlad the Impaler in Wallachia, who also, Vlad, the guy that they based Dracula on.
Yeah.
And also Guar wrote a great song called Vlad the Impaler, too. Maybe I'll put that maybe that'll be the paranormal song of the week. Vlad the Impaler by Guar, because it's a fun one.
Perfect.
But he's got experience with the Turks and the impaling and the stories of, the Turks would impale people and Vlad the Impaler would impale people. Like, these guys were very cruel to prisoners of war. They take him in and they just do horrible things to him. But, Elizabeth Bathory, she was extraordinarily educated. She could speak Greek, Latin, her native tongue. Her husband, they said they could, he wasn't even very good at speaking Hungarian.
Wow.
So he wasn't that smart of a guy, but he was a good fighter.
And they both spoke the language of blood.
Yes, they both spoke the language of blood and cruelty, because... And here's the thing about the time. In the aristocracy, they're in charge. Their family's very powerful. And like peasants, life was cheap for peasants. It was short. Nobody lived that long. And it was unpleasant. Think about the average medieval peasant never went more than a mile away from where they were born.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. So it's that feudal system. You're born to a piece of property. And you're not a slave, but you're tied to the property. You have to work it. You have to go to war when the king sends you out to war. And the whole feudal system is based on having fealty to someone else. And so the peasant makes a fealty to the lord, and the lord owns the farm, and then you work the farm.
It's feudal and it's futile.
Yeah, it's not very fun for the serfs and the peasants who are in there.
No.
But,
Oof.
I mean, Elizabeth also, it was rumored that she had an affair with a peasant, though, when she was 13.
Oh, scandalous.
Yeah, and she was sequestered to a different castle until her daughter ends up being born.
Oh, what a rough life.
And then they paid a peasant woman to take the daughter away and raise the daughter as her own before she's married. So, like, 2 years before she actually is going to get married to her husband, she has a baby with somebody else. All right. But she does marry him, and then he goes off, and he starts fighting the Turks in 1578. They called him the Black Knight of Hungary.
Wow.
And so she's super rich, and she's lending money that whole time to the king, the emperor of Hungary, and the king, so that they can have their war against the Turks. So she's helping finance the war against the Turks. So that this comes into play later, but she is lending them money, and then her husband's going off to fight. And there's stories from this period of her life that she is a cruel person to work for, that she's not easy to work for, that she punishes the servants who disobey or fail her. But there's nothing quite yet that she's torturing them and like bathing in their blood and stuff. So in 1594, Miss Elizabeth is 34 years old. She's got some kids with her count, and he's gone most of the time fighting wars. So she's kind of taking care of everything. She's the one in charge, and she's the smarter one anyway. 1594, she hires Janos Uveri Fichko. And he is a crippled dwarf who becomes her male servant. And she becomes close to him. And he starts getting involved. And so he's one of the people they say is involved in the torturing. And so he starts becoming like her number one servant. And when other servants fail her, Janos Uveri Fichko comes in and is just an angry bastard. And he starts torturing the servants who fail her. 1604, her husband dies. And this is kind of when she goes off the rails. So when her husband dies, that's when people say she starts to up the torture. The first torture is always the stuff under the fingernails.
Oh, no.
It's always where you rip off the fingernails and you start with that. So if you fail her, they start with the ripping off of the fingernails. She accuses anybody of the littlest thing that they stole something from her.
Boy.
She'll say like, hey, if something goes missing, she accuses the servants that they stole something, and then tortures them to get the location out of it and whatever, and kills them. So she's really getting into, her husband dies, and then she just ups the cruelty. She's got this crippled dwarf working for her, and then she gets a couple of women working for her. So the witch, Anna Darvulia, starts hanging out with Elizabeth, and then her former nurse, Alona Jew, is a Joo, starts working for her too. And these are like her torture team.
Her little cronies.
Yeah. And so they're like her lead servants that, what they do is they go out and they collect servant girls for her. And that this was the thing, like the whole idea of Elizabeth Bathory is that when more and more servant girls kept on disappearing, the townsfolk started getting concerned, because it was their daughters and things that would go and never come back. And they were running out of people that they could take, so they would go to different towns and find servant girls who would like to come learn etiquette from the countess. They would like to better their station by working for the countess. Now, they didn't know that she was going to smear them with honey and let bees and ants go all over their body.
Oh my gosh.
And so, and in the story, and this all came out, this is how people testified to it. They said that she often bit chunks of flesh from her victims.
Oh.
One girl was tortured by having to cook and eat her own flesh.
No.
So they cut off a piece
Yuck.
of her, and then they cooked it and ate it. That reminds me of Hannibal. If you guys have seen or read Hannibal.
She's straight up horror movie content here.
Well, this is the I mean, this is the inspiration for a lot of the horror stuff. But,
Yeah.
The thing is that she does it with all the servant girls, and they look a blind eye. Number one, remember, she's owed a lot of money by the crown. So she's owed a lot of money by the crown, and her family is super powerful. There is, like, nobody wants to, like, make her mad or make her family mad. So they kind of like, if it's just servant girls, all right. Well, what happens, though, is that in 1609 in the winter, she invites around 25 noblewomen whose families had, like, fallen on hard times to stay with her. And they, this was one of those things, you're going to learn how to handle yourself at court from the countess. You're going to learn how to handle a family and being a powerful woman and all these things from the countess. Well, they get there and she kills a few of them.
Oh, no.
Right, yeah. So she tortures the noble women of low, whose families had had hard times. And
they learned something, all right.
Right. She said one of them killed the other one for jewelry, so she had to punish him. And then another committed suicide. So she's making up all these excuses of why these horrible things were happening to people. And that's just the bridge too far. So they start investigating. They're like, okay, we gotta see what she's doing and what happened to her. And she starts getting investigated by her cousin, Count Giorgio Thurzo. So, but the thing is, he's also the guy that's gonna, like, turn out best if she ends up losing her lands and stuff like that. So he's gonna get all that stuff if he does it. So the guy investigating her is also the guy who's going to make out the best if something happens to her. So her cousin's gonna get her stuff, and so he's the guy investigating. And also, the emperor at the time, he's like, hey, she happens to, like, hold our marker on a lot of money. So if she ends up being a horrible person, I guess we don't have to pay her back. But by 1610 then, that's when they're doing the investigation. And it says that when they actually come onto the castle, and this is where things start getting, like, the rumors and everything start going off the handle. And this is where things that they get in the giant book of fantastic facts. Because, like, one of the stories from her accuser is that when they finally got to her castle to bring her in, that she had, 300 servant girls. They found, like, the bodies of, like, 300 servant girls there.
Gosh.
And there was people in various states of torture, and there's people imprisoned and all these kind of things. So say 300. Whether that's true or not, there's only one person that said that at the trial. But the thing is, 1611, the year starts out, and she's not brought to trial, but who are her accomplices. And this is where all of the testimony and everything happens. This is the one, where they say that nobody says the bathing in blood. That doesn't show up until, like, 1825, when a guy wrote a fictional story about Elizabeth Bathory. So the whole bathing in blood thing, the thing that she's most famous for, and this too, like, I feel, is a little bit of, we're using those stereotypes of women against them here. She is so vain. She's so vain that she would kill a virgin just so her skin would be more smooth. And Wendy, I know women go to extraordinary lengths for their skincare.
Well, yeah. I mean, you've been in the lotion aisle at Walgreens, right?
Right. And none of them say blood of the virgin lotion.
No.
So it's at this, and then people are testifying against her, and they're testifying about all these horrible things. That's where they talk about the smearing the girls with honey and letting them be attacked by bees and ants. That's where they talk about the cooking, and eating little bits of flesh and everything. And it's the trial of her servants, and one of the servant girls who's testifying against her said that Elizabeth kept a tally of her kills. And she said that she saw the number 650 in the diary.
Oh my gosh!
But that was never, like, they never found that. Yeah, that was just something. Yeah. But we use that story of the 650 girls that she killed. Like, that's what you say. Like, oh yeah, Elizabeth Bathory, she killed. She's the world's worst serial killer. Is how she's always said.
Well, all those things just make the story more, appealing to the mass audience. The imagery of her bathing in blood is so creepy and so horror movie-esque.
Right.
And then also having a quantity of people that high, like, higher than any serial killer ever, it turns her kind of into this legendary character. And it's a lot more interesting than just some rich old lady that's a hag and likes to torture people.
Right, just like a total horrible person.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, her servants did get theirs. So they were found guilty. And so, like the girls that were helping her out, they had all their fingers torn out by a pair of red-hot pincers. So this is justice now. For torturing people, then you torture them. And they were thrown alive onto a fire. So they were, first their fingers were burnt, were ripped out, and then they were thrown alive onto a fire. So helping Elizabeth Bathory, that's an unpleasant end. And then poor little Fitchko.
Came with a high price.
Yeah, poor little Fitchko. They cut his head off and then burned him.
Oh.
So I guess at least they cut his head off first before they burned him. So he didn't have to have the whole burning alive kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like during the trial, she wanted to defend herself against the charges. She admits to killing.
Oh, wow.
Well, she admitted to killing 36 people, is what she admitted to. Of the account they said that 80 different. There were 80 different people that they could testify that she had killed through cruelty. But she said that she didn't torture anybody, but that she was trying to help them through like medical, so that her torture or whatever was actually her trying to help them with medicine.
For their own good.
Yeah. No, that it wasn't. Well, it wasn't quite torture. It was that surgery at the time was so absolutely barbaric that it seemed like torture, but it wasn't. So she never confessed. She just said that specific deaths that were attributed to her were because she was an untrained doctor. And so she was trying to help the people who were ill and injured war victims because they're still fighting the Turks the whole time. And it was because of her poor doctor work that those 37 people were killed.
Wow.
So that's where she comes. So she just would admit to some stuff, but then they wanted to put her on trial. In fact, King Matthias II of the emperor of the Hungarian Empire, whatever, he wanted to bring her to trial. And of course they want to get as much stuff from her family as they can. And her relatives just would not let that happen. And so what they did is they sent her up to a castle with a small room that had a food hatch and ventilation slits. And that was it. So she was in that room for 4 years, and like a guard hears her one time, like on either August 14th or August 21st, 1614. So she's 54 by this time, 54 years old. She calls out to the guard that she's cold and just wants some help, and he says, the soup or whatever, like when you get dinner in you, you'll feel warmer, and that's what he says. And then they find her a few hours later, she's dead, laying in the thing. So Elizabeth Bathory, not very much of a vampire end, and they don't say like if her skin actually was like really nice.
Yeah, that's the
whole
that would
thing.
be the real question. Did it work?
But the thing about
or
it,
if she even did it.
I mean, her legend gets completely exaggerated because it's extraordinarily gross, and it fits in that kind of. The woman is so vain, she's killed, and plus she's entitled because she's royalty. It just fits into all these things, these categories that make us, they are prurient interest or whatever, that they satisfy our need for sadistic kind of stories with Elizabeth Bathory. Now, was she a horrible person? Probably. Did she torture people? Yeah. Sure. I mean, like her family, one particular kind of torture they did that I read when I was reading about a different family and the different ways they would torture people or they would punish them for certain things is they tied up one guy inside the body of a dying horse. Like they stitched him inside the body of a dying horse. So he would get sick too and eventually just, waste away and just die inside the body of the horse. But they let him keep his head out so he could stay alive longer. So they stitched like the whole inside the body and with just the head sticking out so that he could die from the disease.
Humans are disgusting.
Yes, from the disease and they'd cut him so that he would get the diseases of the horses. Anyway.
Unreal.
So we're not talking about a lot of nice people in the first place. But was her trial and the stories of her cruelty and the testimony against her, politically motivated? Absolutely. Absolutely politically motivated. And we weren't there, and it's not like we got a videotape of the proceedings or anything like that. But you can think that if it's a bunch of rich Europeans in the Middle Ages fighting about something, there's going to be money, there's going to be some backstabbing, there's going to be some torture involved here. And I would think, so Elizabeth Bathory, really bathed in the blood of virgins? The answer is no. However, my friends.
I was going to ask you, Mike. Now, the real question is, you were talking about, perhaps needing some rejuvenation.
Yes. So
tell me about it.
Well, I mean, this first started getting some traction a few years ago, at least because you know who Peter Thiel is from PayPal?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so Peter Thiel from PayPal, rich guy. He made a lot of headlines in the past couple of years because he introduced Donald Trump at the Republican National Convention, and that obviously didn't go well with his friends in Silicon Valley. But Peter Thiel's a billionaire, and he's done things that billionaires do, like he funded Hulk Hogan's lawsuit against Gawker, that the $100 million Gawker media empire no longer exists because Gawker outed Peter Thiel as gay in 2007.
Wow.
Without, they just said, by the way, Peter Thiel's gay. And so he hadn't come out of the closet yet. And so he's like, I wasn't ashamed about it, but I didn't like the idea that they could expose a private citizen like that. So he waited his turn until there was some kind of some case against Gawker that was good enough to put them out of business. And when they published that illegally recorded porno tape of Hulk Hogan, first of all, I watched the whole thing. It's disgusting. But second of all, it's the Hulkster. I'm a wrestling fan.
Yeah.
But second of all, by such a violation of privacy, he knew he had a case. So Peter Thiel does things like that. He also invests in a ton of companies. He wants to build a libertarian island paradise off the coast of California, that will have its own government. He's already started. He does supervillain kind of things sometimes. We're gonna have our own island with no rules. People are gonna live there. We're gonna test these city nations on the water. So this whole thing, and so people are interested in the kind of things that he invests in. And in Silicon Valley, you get a bunch of guys in their 20s and 30s, and women too, in the 20s and 30s, who have more money. They've got more money than the GDP of some countries.
Yeah.
Peter Thiel's got more money than Gambia. So when he invests in something, people are interested. And one thing that was going on in Silicon Valley maybe 5 or 6 years ago was that they were trying to find ways to stop death.
Or to stop aging, right?
Right. But yeah, both. It was that whole we can, just because you made a search engine or whatever, or you figured out a way for people to pay each other money on their phones, all of a sudden they're now we've got billions of dollars, we're going to figure out how to stop death.
Or stop the aging process.
Right.
You can't stop death because,
No, but stop humans from having to die. Was the kind of
from
thing.
natural causes, right?
You still can't stop it from getting shot in the head or whatever.
Right, exactly. Falling off a cliff.
Yeah, even though there's an entire series, Torchwood, which is a Doctor Who spinoff called Miracle Day that they showed on Stars, that would show what would happen if people actually stopped dying.
Oh, that would be interesting.
I'd give it a solid C+ as far as Torchwood goes. But Miracle Day is what would happen if people just stopped dying one day? One day, no one dies. And so what would happen in the world if that thing? So that is an interesting premise.
Yeah, it's a neat concept to think about.
Yeah. But so Peter Thiel says one of the things he's interested in is this startup called Ambrosia Medical. And Ambrosia Medical is taking these parabiosis experiments that they've been starting to do them in the 1950s with the mice. And so they're doing these things with the mice, and they're finding that when old mice drink the blood of young mice, or they, old mice get infused with the blood of young mice, they start acting different.
So wait, there is a difference there. Not drinking the blood. They're actually
in some of the mice, they're sharing a circulatory system by being stitched together. In others, they're just removing the blood from one mouse and giving the blood to the other mouse. But it's not just the fact that the old mice start acting more youthful, running around more, and the heart rates get better, and it's that the certain kinds of hormones that get produced when you're younger, like the growth hormones and things, that their bodies start reproducing the hormones and the proteins and things associated with younger animals. So the blood doesn't just have the effect of a little bit of rejuvenation so they start acting different. It's actually recharging their bodies.
Wow.
And so that's why
cool.
That's why this became a very, people were very excited about it.
Intriguing.
So you get, in 2005 and 2010, there's some similar studies that get done. And that's kind of what relaunches this Ambrosia Medical, is these particular studies in 2005 and 2010 that start reporting the anti-aging effect of what do they call heterochronic parabiosis, which is actually, like I said, the joining the age mouse to the younger partner. And in the abstract of this particular paper, it says it's elegantly shown that factors derived from the young systemic environment are able to activate molecular signaling pathways in hepatic, muscle, or neural stem cells of the old parabiont. So like a symbiont, whatever is one half a symbiosis, one half a parabiosis is a parabiont, leading to increased tissue regeneration. So the study that came out said, we need to study this more to see how we can translate it into the life of old human beings. And actually says old human beings. And it's
nice.
And the study is called The Fountain of Youth. And this particular study is just from last year, October 28th, 2017. It was a review of the latest research of this whole idea that you are filling patients' veins with blood from more youthful people, and people start feeling better. And I know this idea, this joke that Peter Thiel wants to live forever on his libertarian island paradise or whatever. And I know they made fun of it on the TV show Silicon Valley too. Ambrosia Medical is finally ready to go retail or whatever. And they're planning on opening up a store. Not necessarily, I would say a store. It's not like the blood store. It's more like they're opening up a clinic. And they're hoping to do it in New York before the end of the year. And they ran some of their own clinical trials last year, but they haven't made those public yet. But the company founders said that the results from the trial were really positive. Recipients felt like they had better sleep, focus, and memory following a transfusion of young blood, as well as improved muscle tone. So they have to release
That's exciting.
Yep, they have to release the study to back it up with some data.
Yeah.
But the thing is, all it is a blood transfusion. And blood or plasma transfusions are already procedures that are approved by the FDA.
Oh.
So, because we've all given blood to the Red Cross at some time, or I'm sure somebody's given plasma for money. I know that's one thing I've done a lot of things for money. I've never given plasma for money.
No,
I might do that on the way home.
Well, in college, a lot of our friends did that.
Yeah, because you could make like $50 a time or something like that to give a plasma.
You could just keep going back.
And so I think a lot of it would be like this. So they would take plasma from, college students or whatever, and then you would just do a blood transfusion to somebody older. $8,000 is the infusion of young blood.
Wow.
And, that's what they do. And the thing is, you might not, they probably have some patented processes, but because the Red Cross and because of plasma centers and things like that, all of the legal or medical hangups or roadblocks that would be associated with it, all you're doing is a blood transfusion. So yeah, that's not even that. People get blood transfusions all the time. This one would just be specifically for getting a vampire treatment. Getting the vampire treatment.
That's going to make so many college students happy too. More opportunities to donate blood and make some money.
And this just last week is what they announced that they're going to get. So you guys are going to be able to go to New York and get a parabiotic vampire treatment with young people's blood coming up pretty soon.
That's right.
And
save your pennies.
And I'm going to do it. Maybe I'm going to do it. We'll see. I don't know. I'm not going to do it lately. But I do think it's really interesting how, like these billionaires put money into this company because they probably want to feel rejuvenated too. You're not going to be 25 forever.
Well, I think it's funny that, it's come full circle. It used to seem like such a medieval thing, and now it's, 2018, and we've got people spending thousands of dollars for the same kind of treatment. Because, we talked about people drinking blood for youth that people used to do back before it was discovered that it's not the healthiest behavior.
Right. Well, we think we think the whole idea is disgusting, and it's shocked. And the idea of drinking blood seems like a very barbaric thing. But what if you didn't drink it? What if they just transfused it?
Really?
But in real Elizabeth Bathory style, you could get there's a place in Albuquerque that had these things called a vampire facial.
No.
And yeah, even Kim Kardashian, there's a picture of her with a vampire facial. And they called it the vampire facial,
That's
this
nasty.
Albuquerque spa. And well, the idea was that they would put a little bit of blood on your face. A plasma-rich protein facial. So when I think about that, okay, so blood is full of protein. I know that from the Era Plus commercials when we were kids, because they're like, there'd be the stain. They'd be like, Era Plus has protein, and protein cuts protein, or whatever. And
That's right. Wow, your memory is amazing.
So I mean, yeah,
Is that how they wash the facial off after they?
Era Plus? That's what they use,
Right.
But no, even the Cleveland Clinic has a whole thing about protein-rich facials. That, plasma-rich protein facial combines plasma and platelets from your blood with other rejuvenation techniques. So, yeah, they even talk about it, and it totally works, too, that these, they create platelet-rich plasma, and they spread some on your face, and then use microneedling across your cheeks and forehead to help your face absorb the proteins. Microneedling is exactly what it sounds like, a procedure that creates a series of tiny superficial punctures using sterile needles. So, yeah, you even get punctured with the blood facial from the Cleveland Clinic. The problem is that this spa in New Mexico was not using your blood. I think it was using other people's blood.
Ew.
Because the whole thing is like the New Mexico Board of Health said, like, hey, if you got a facial from this place, you got to get tested for HIV and hepatitis B and C.
Oh, wow.
And this just came out Thursday, September 13th. So this is why I wanted to talk about Elizabeth Bathory, and this is why I want to talk about, because all this rejuvenating blood stuff seemed to be happening at once. Vampire facials, Ambrosia Medical, and I just thought we should all go back and learn a little bit about the original vampire facial. And that's the blood countess.
The blood bath.
Yeah.
Literal blood bath.
Mrs. Elizabeth Bathory. Anyway, so that's just a little bit on that. We're starting Halloween season with some vampires.
Yeah.
The thing that got me the most, probably, when we're talking about Countess Bathory and we're talking about all these different stuff from the 16th century, what shocked me the most was the fact that nobody cared about the kind of stuff that she supposedly was doing until she killed like noble women. So that was the only time that people actually started when it was servant girls, it didn't matter. That kind of blew my mind, in that it doesn't matter what era you're in, it doesn't matter where you're from, people will do whatever it takes for their political purposes. And the lives are subject to the whims of her capriciousness. Her accomplices were tortured and killed while she was merely sentenced to life imprisonment and walled up in her own castle. The difference between noble and peasant, that's really what sticks out as the injustice. People didn't do anything because she was noble. She was allowed to indulge her sickest instincts because it was politically expedient. And all I got to say is, barf. So that's the inspiration behind this song. This week, we're going to sing a little song about Elizabeth, and it's called The Blood of Bathory.
Who's the most wicked woman to live in this world? Who bears in the blood of all the innocent girls? Get He turned the blind eye, but the king he could see. Murder for pleasure in the family tree. He indulged the aristocracy. For every hand is where the blood of Bathory. much as your ancestry. The tribes will battle, the rulers will speechify. We'll watch the fireworks as the little people die. Who's the most wicked woman that live in this world? Who bears in the blood of all the innocent girls in the aristocracy? For every hand is wet, the blood of Bathory. The blood of Bathory.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. You can find us online at OthersidePodcast.com. Until next time, see you on the other side.
You know what else is rejuvenating, Wendy?
What's rejuvenating, Mike?
Our Patreon community.
Oh, so rejuvenating. I feel like a child again after our hangout last week.
I do. Every time I get to hear from our patrons, I totally feel like I'm not tired anymore. I feel good. Human growth hormone courses through my veins and my muscle tone improves. And the thing is, we've been hearing from our Patreons that their muscle tone has improved ever since joining the See You on the Other
That's
Side
incredible.
community. Yeah, isn't it?
It is, truly.
So your chance to check it out, get your own See You on the Other Side vampire facial. You can do that OthersidePodcast.com/donate. And we got a special shout out to our man, Dr. Ned.
Hey, thank you, Ned, so much for supporting our cause at the level where you get a shout out every single episode. And Ned, we appreciate all of your support. We appreciate the support of all of our Patreon members, and we're really happy to get to know everybody through that community. So if you'd like to join us, how can they join us, Mike?
They can join us by going to patreon.com/sunspotmusic or OthersidePodcast.com/donate.
Thanks for listening.
Bleed you later. Go in with a little needle, and then so we're gonna take some blood out. Here, a little mouse. We're gonna take some blood out, and then put it in this older mouse.
Glurgle, glurgle, glurgle.